Okay, so I am here once again with the Dark Fool, and if you haven't subscribed already, please check out his channel. Like I've stated before, he's one of the OG left-hand path satanic types on YouTube. Aren't you, Dark Fool?
I am, I was, and I will get my channel up and going when the time is right and when I get better equipment, because times have changed since then. We gotta up our ante.
Definitely, definitely. All right, so now, core to this organization. Okay, this organization is called the Sect of the Horn God.
Right.
Okay? The Horn God is ambiguous. The Horn God is I guess you could say the original, well, besides the sun, it is the earliest God form, if you will, anthropomorphic.
Okay.
Besides, let's say the sun or the earth mother or whatever.
And it's very much an archetype it's the all-encompassment of what the horn god is.
Right.
And so it spans from all kinds of mythologies, east and west.
And there are vastly different, quote, gods that fit within that horn god archetype. You can go to the east. People don't realize that Shiva is a horn god archetype.
Right. Dionysus, who I'm a fan of.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he doesn't have horns. And Odin falls within the horn god archetype.
There were early depictions of Dionysus that had horns.
In their early depictions of Odin, actually.
Exactly.
Odin, back when he was Wodenaz or Vodnaz, with horns and so on. Now, there is, within comparative mythology, a connection between these all. Now, is it related to something deep within the human makeup, within the human psyche? Or is it something out of history, a memory of sorts? Or is it a little bit of both?
Right. You know what? I am of the mindset that it is a little bit of both. I think that certain archetypes represent things that we have deeply instilled in us that might even go beyond us. But, like, for example, I've heard talk about archetypes like any archetype that has a beard that represents knowledge and knowledgeable. Anything that has certain things that have to do with the mother and motherly, things that connect to that. So what a horned god, what does that, obviously, when you have one mythology, let's say like Christianity, you're talking about something darker, something evil, something sinister, but
right.
That also spans throughout a whole bunch of other mythologies, east
right.
and west.
Right. Now, we span, as you just said, we span east and west within the philosophy of the sect. And our highest order, those who have gone up the 5 orders, the 5th order is the order of Shiva. Now, just because we utilize Shiva does not make us Hindu.
Right.
Just as if you revere Satan doesn't make you Hebrew.
Right, right.
You know what I mean?
Or Christian, for that matter.
Or
being
Christian,
part
for
of
that, exactly.
mythology, yeah.
Exactly. It just means you revere the symbol, if you will, the entity, the deity, however you want to phrase it. Now, my fascination lately has been this connection between Shiva and Shiva's form Rudra and Odin.
Yeah. That, in some of the work that I've been doing recently, some of the research, I have come across the very same thing. Odin and Rudra being the active form of Shiva.
Right.
There is a strong parallel, and that parallel would be Shiva's active form. Let's see, Shiva is originally part of the Trimurti.
Right.
So there is a part of him that is, in a sense, passive as part of just being part of that. But then the active form of an actual, destroyer, when he actually is... And it also ties into Nietzsche's will to power.
Right, very much so.
Same with Odin when he was on the tree.
Right.
His will to power, his will of knowledge, his drive to move forward, to know, and to be the master of certain things. That all three of these definitely have that drive, that force.
And if you think about it, I mean, some theorize that Odin, when he was hanging from the tree, he was sacrificing himself.
Yes.
To a greater god.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read some articles and so on, blogs or whatever, that people think that he was probably sacrificing himself to Shiva. Now,
well, that's interesting.
But if you now you think about it, now who is Shiva? Shiva is the god of Atman. Atman is you. So Shiva is you in a greater god form, in a sense. So
yeah,
he was in the end sacrificing himself to himself.
To himself, yeah. And you know what? And what did he get out of that? If you look at the mythology, he got
the runes,
yep,
the
knowledge
of the runes. But if you think about it, what's more left-hand path than that?
Oh, it's the, you know what? And I want to draw a parallel to that. Speaking of comparative, Crowley's mythology, the Deck of Thoth. If you looked at the Hanged Man, Crowley looked at the Hanged Man and said, okay, that is a kind of a bygone of an old era, the hanging god, like Christ.
Right.
And in I'm sure many listeners here know of Crowley and how much he detested the Plymouth Brethren and Christianity and all that stuff, and his whole life was rebellion. Anyway, so he looked at the Hanged Man as, okay, well, that's from a bygone era that has no it's kind of an echo on the Tree of Life. That's an echo of an old era, and this is where I fundamentally disagree. I think there is still very much relevance when we take it to Odin,
right?
Because if it's relevant for all ages, all aeons, if you will, for those of you out there occultically minded. If you are putting in the work and sacrificing yourself to yourself, as the mythology or as the parable is, you are going to get higher. You're doing it not for selfish, egotistical reasons. I want to make that parallel, that draw very clear. But if you're doing it for the sake itself, for the love of the work itself, as Crowley would put it, devoid of the lust of result. You know, if you are doing it for not personal, egotistical satisfaction, but for the love of, you know, like, okay, an artist, a musician, they are performing music, they are recording a piece of it, they're in that zone. Does that make sense?
Creating magic.
There you go.
That's exactly what they're doing. What is more magical than that? You're manifesting your will.
Mm-hmm. Going back to Rudra, that active will that is inherent actually in nature. If you really look at the will to power, it's all throughout the animal kingdom.
Oh yeah.
It's that will. It's that will and that drive and that force to push, to evolve. So still the sacrifice of Odin and the sacrifice of the Hanged Man within that context is still relevant. Very much relevant. It's the drive to evolve.
Now, some people have a problem with comparative mythology, with syncretism, if you will. They think it lacks purity. Myself, and this is a major aspect of this organization, is it's quite the opposite. It's trying to find the purity. It's trying to find that gem, if you will, that pure gem, that pearl within it all of truth. And what you're doing is, I mentioned this in my last video actually, is by doing so, metaphorically, you're finding the truth within yourself, within the primal aspects of yourself.
Absolutely. Now, going back to what you said about purity, I see why some people would say it lacks purity. certain groups, especially when you get into a collective mentality. Yeah, it's going to lack purity. You're cutting from other sources. You're taking from other sources so you're muddying the waters, so to speak. But a lot of people see purity in the sense of this came from our tribe. This mythology is the way because it is of our tribe.
Right. I get what you're saying. I get fully what you're saying. But if you can find a commonality within the tribes, the vast tribes, stretched throughout let's say the Eurasian continent, if you can somehow narrow it down, that's what I mean.
And that's why I love comparative mythology and Joseph Campbell's work. Is because what are all of these stories trying to say? That core truth. No matter what tribe it came from, no matter where it originated, what is really being said here? That's the essence. That is the purest. True. Okay, the road may be windy. Okay, the ingredients may be muddied, but once you get to that core truth, it's all worth it. What is everybody? It's like when you get into an argument with somebody and you're both saying the same thing, just in different words.
Which happens so often. Okay. So, my friends, what do you think? Are you one of those fundamentalists, one of those purists that doesn't like the idea of synchronicity or syncretism? Or are you open to a more, let's say, a more deeper psychological view of it all? Leave your comments down below, and thanks again for helping me out on this.
Anytime.
Dark Fool.